Our current culture revolves around emotion. Everything is shared to get a reaction. Important details are skipped. Inferences are made. Accusations are thrown around. Name-calling is constant. Unsurprisingly, this emotion-filled, language-centered, personally offended, politically correct worldview is deep inside the Canadian government. And it's all revolving around hate. The word that can't really be defined, but can so easily be felt or accused. I remember growing up, we were always told, hate is a bad word. The only things we hate are sin and the devil, which is true. Because in this world, we are surrounded by people made in the image of God, and a feeling of complete and utter disdain, disgust, or extreme aversion or hostility probably should not be felt towards fellow human beings. Really, we hope to raise our children in a world where they could not possibly understand the word hate. That when they say, I hate broccoli, then we know they don't mean it because they don't understand the depth of emotion that comes with such a word. But as adults, we certainly understand it a little more and are also prone to it more, especially if we allow our emotions to control our thoughts and actions. Now, of course, the struggle is that the accusation of hate or hate speech is indefinitive. It doesn't have meaning. It is completely subjective. If I feel like you hate me, then the fault lies with you, and the hatred lies with you, and the responsibility and guilt also lie with you, regardless of your actual feelings or your actual meaning. And that brings us to the topic of today's episode, the Combating Hate Act, or Bill C-9. Welcome to Canadian Rubies. We're a podcast for Christian women here in Canada, and today we're diving into current Canadian politics. Be sure to follow us on Instagram so you don't miss any new episodes or updates, and find us wherever you find your podcasts. As always, if you have any questions or comments on today's episode, please reach out on Instagram or email me at canadian.rubies@gmail.com. Now, we know, well, hopefully you know, that free speech in Canada is already under attack. We've seen it in the news for the last few years. ARPA has had signs removed citing hate. The Christian Heritage Party is currently in court against the city of Hamilton for rejecting an ad they had on a bus shelter that said, "Woman, an adult female, bringing respect for life and truth to Canadian politics." The city, of course, felt that the ad was discriminatory. Back in 2020, 2 people put up a billboard in Vancouver that said, "I love J.K. Rowling." It was covered over the next day after Vancouver City Councilwoman tweeted that it was meant to stoke hate, exclusion, and division. In this case and other cases, it does come down to private property being rented, which is one thing. But when governments and government officials are making comments or choosing what ads can go on a city-run bus shelter, then that's a problem. And when it's based around a subjective concept of hate or discrimination, then we have bigger problems. Remember in 2023, ARPA took the city of Hamilton to court for refusing to run a Defend Girls bus ad campaign. The city backed out at the last minute, claiming they hadn't considered freedom of expression, and the court released the case, with the city paying $20,000 for ARPA's legal fees and eventually running the Defend Girls campaign ad. So what are Canada's current laws on freedom of speech or hate speech? Very briefly, Section 2 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms gives everyone the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. Then, the Criminal Code has a section on hate that covers things like public incitement of hate, so basically a threat of violence, promotion of hate against identifiable groups, and promotion of anti-Semitism. These sections of the code put what are called reasonable limits on the freedom of speech and expression. Court cases have upheld these criminal codes as reasonable limits that prevent hateful propaganda from being spread. There are certainly people who disagree with the existence of these sections in the criminal code, but they are relatively in line with many other democratic countries in limiting freedom of speech in order to protect others and in order to prevent the violence that may follow the threats people made. We could certainly debate the pros and cons of these sections, but they already exist. So we're going to accept them and look at what Bill C-9 seeks to change or add to these sections. As of the recording of this, on February 17, the bill is still in committee, where it has been paused for the time being. It's unclear what all the reasons are for this pause or when the committee will pick it back up, so it's a good time to become informed on this bill. I'll share some of the details of the bill as well as some arguments for and against it that were made in the first committee hearing for the bill on October 23, 2025. Bill C-9 is a proposed amendment to the criminal code, so it's not a smooth bill to peruse, but a group of segments that seek to change or add parts to the criminal code. There is a lot of things going on with this bill, and a lot of conversations happening around it, so I apologize if some sections of this podcast seem disjointed, but hopefully by the end you have a better understanding of what's going on and why it matters. I'll start with the summary given at the top of the bill itself. This enactment amends the criminal code to, among other things, first, repeal the requirement that the Attorney General consent to the institution of proceedings for hate propaganda offenses. Second, create an offense of willfully promoting hatred against any identifiable group by displaying certain symbols in a public place. Third, create a hate crime offense of committing an offense under that act or any other act of Parliament that is motivated by hatred based on certain factors. Fourth, create an offense of intimidating a person in order to impede them from accessing certain places that are primarily used for religious worship or by an identifiable group for certain purposes. And fifth, to create an offense of intentionally obstructing or interfering with a person's lawful access to such places. That is the briefest of introductions. I'll get into some of the arguments made at the committee because I think it gives some good details on some of the more specific changes and their effects. The CCLA, or Canadian Civil Liberties Association, sent a representative to the committee to state their disagreements with the bill. This followed a letter that they wrote and signed with 36 other civil society organizations, where they stated, "Unfortunately, as drafted, Bill C-9 fails to meet the required democratic balance and risks serious infringements on fundamental freedoms protected under both the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and international law. We urge you to reconsider your approach, while keeping in mind that criminal law is not the solution to every social issue." You'll see discussion on the Charter come up several times throughout this discussion because it is the standard that the bill must ultimately pass. Two professors from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario came before the committee with statements and answered questions from the committee members. Professor Ryan Alford is a professor of constitutional law, and he told the committee, "This bill does indeed lower the threshold below what is constitutional for a limitation on the right to freedom of expression." To be clear, laws can put reasonable limits on the freedoms in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The main problem Professor Alford states with the bill as it stands is the definition of hate that is added to the criminal code. Section 319(7) adds this definition. Hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification, and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. Over the course of a couple of different Supreme Court cases, the definition of hatred has become narrowed and defined within the current court system. The first definition was hatred as unusually strong and deep felt emotions of detestation, calumny, and vilification. That has been changed slightly, and the current definition referenced by courts is hatred as an emotion of an intense and extreme nature that is clearly associated with vilification and detestation. This sounds similar to Section 319.7, right? It's very similar, but there are two important language changes. First, the intense and extreme nature of the emotion has been removed, and it is only categorized as being stronger than disdain or dislike. And also, the phrase detestation and vilification has been changed to detestation or vilification. Similar, but very different. Just quietly opening little windows of opportunity for perceived hate to be more easily prosecuted. Professor Alford also explains
that to be a reasonable limitation, the definition of hatred has to exclude not merely what it excludes now, but in particular, speech that otherwise affronts the dignity of persons or groups. And that's not what's currently in 319.7. Therefore, it is not a codification of the pertinent leading case that comprises what the Supreme Court of Canada has said is necessary for a reasonable limitation to be constitutional under Section 2B of the Charter.
Alford also references the current situation in the UK, which he says has 30 arrests per day for things shared on social media that may be an affront to someone's dignity, but is not detestation or vilification. Professor Bruce Pardy also came from Queen's University, where he is a professor of law. He shared some interesting points, including that the bill makes detestation illegal, and to detest means to dislike something intensely. So dislike itself would be legal, but intense dislike would be illegal. He also referenced the truckers' protest during COVID lockdowns. Bill C-9 promotes a fear of offensive ideas. This means that the truckers' protest could easily be counted as illegal, even though it was peaceful. Bill C-9 adds, every person commits an offense who engages in any conduct with the intent to provoke a state of fear in a person in order to impede their access to a building or a structure or a cemetery. This does not require fear of violence, just perceived fear. This leaves the door wide open to shutting down anything the government doesn't like. To conclude his opening statement, Pardy stated that
in a free country, and I mean in a genuinely free country, which we once claimed to be, you are allowed to hate other people. And you are allowed to say that you do.
Other witnesses appeared before the Justice Committee who were more in favor of the bill, but most came with some modification requests. Particularly, there is great concern for the part of the bill that removes the requirement for the Attorney General to consent to the proceedings in relation to hate-related crimes. Mark Sandler, the chair of the Alliance of Canadians Combating Anti-Semitism, spoke as an individual and shared,
So I am concerned, and I have expressed that concern for over 30 years, that the Attorney General's consent is a safeguard against the frivolous and vexatious use of these sensitive sections of the criminal code.
He was supported by Brandon Silver of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Sandler. There are other solutions. We can create a more efficient and faster system without having to eliminate the provisions that require this consent of the Attorney General. We can keep them and create a more efficient internal process that involves collaboration between the different levels of government, namely the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. Sandler also shared some support for the bill. Member of Parliament 14 from the Bloc Québécois asked him if what was added in Bill C-9 was already covered by the current criminal code, as others had claimed. Sandler responded that
when you look at the hate offense, for example, that is something that is being added that is new because it is labeling the offense in a different way than it's currently labeled. The reason why the labeling is important is because a lot of the hate mongers are repeat offenders, and it's important that the criminal record labels their prior offenses in a way that prosecutors and police know that the prior offenses were hate motivated. That is not always apparent from looking at the record. And it provides for enhanced penalties if the Crown proceeds by indictment. So for me, that's not duplication.
Silver also defended Bill C-9 against the claims that it went against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Not only are hate speech prohibitions not in breach of the Charter, they actually help protect it. Hate is an assault on the inherent dignity of the person, on the equal dignity of all people, on the right of minorities to protection from group vilifying hate, and on Canada's international treaty obligations. There is no right to use one's freedom of expression to infringe upon the rights of others.
You can see how the Charter is being pulled different ways by different interpretations. Many religious groups, including Christians, are most concerned about one section of Bill C-9, which seeks to remove what is called the Good Faith Religious Defense Clause in the current criminal code. Right now, Section 319(3) of the Criminal Code states that no person shall be convicted of an offense under subsection 2, and then it has 4 defenses, including if, in good faith, the person expressed or attempted to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject, or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. The Bloc Québécois have been pushing to remove this exemption for several years, claiming it acts as a cover for promoting hate. Allegedly, the Liberal Party added this amendment to Bill C-9 in exchange for support from the Bloc for the bill. Of course, the Liberal defense is that this removal is no big deal. Justice Minister Sean Fraser explained confidently that the amendment that the Bloc is proposing will in no way, shape, or form prevent a religious leader from reading their religious texts. It will not criminalize faith. We are dealing with charges that touch on the willful promotion of hate. That is not a value that the major religions stand for. The main problem, of course, is not what the Liberals claim the intent of the bill is. What matters is what is in writing and how easily it can be used or abused. Now, in a sense, it is true. We do not stand for hate. We stand for truth. But truth sounds like hate to the ears of the fool. Remember Paul's warning in 1 Corinthians 2, verse 14 to 16. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them, because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. Removing the good faith religious defense clause does not prevent me from reading my Bible at home and sharing it in private conversations. But it certainly could prevent me or prosecute me for reading my Bible out loud in some sort of public forum, like, say, a podcast or an Instagram reel, because the contents of the Bible are perceived as hateful. In addition, the good faith religious defense clause allows for an argument or an opinion based on belief in a religious text. So it's not just about reading our religious texts, as Minister Fraser states, but it's about debating and explaining what the texts say. This comes to what I believe is the base problem with the bill. It makes legislation too subjective. Cassandra Hallett, the executive director of the Canadian Teachers Federation, was also a witness before the Justice Committee. She stated,
"Unfortunately, the CTF-FCA and our member organizations in every province and territory have observed a rise in the level of what we feel is hate-fueled language and protest in Canada."
Hopefully you can identify the problem in this statement. What we feel is hate-fueled. Feelings do not run legislation. Feelings are fickle and can often be wrong. How easy is it to feel that someone hates you or holds something against you? How many relationships have you questioned because of miscommunication or a lack of communication only to find out that everything was fine? In a culture that focuses more and more on a victim mentality, what sort of chaos is Bill C-9 opening this country up to? So, what does this mean for us right now? First of all, remember, the bill is still in committee. Even better, it's currently paused in committee. For a quick socials review, once it is done there, the committee can bring it back to the House with any suggestions or updates that they deem wise, where it goes to a debate and a vote for the third time. If it passes there, it goes to the Senate. In the Senate, it goes through the same process of floor vote, committee, and floor vote again. If the identical language is passed by both the House and the Senate, then the bill just needs royal assent from the Governor General, which has never been refused, and then it becomes a law. That leaves us with time for prayers and petitions, which is my advice for next steps. Before you write a letter or email to your local MP, bow your head in prayer to the great ruler who truly controls all things. We know he is stronger than any political party, and all things happen according to his will, so we can rest secure in whatever outcome may occur. We also know that he has chosen the time and place that we would live, and so it is time to take up our responsibilities as citizens of this country he has placed us in. Reach out to your local MPs with a phone call or email or handwritten note. Let their office be flooded with your opinions on all aspects of Bill C-9, even if you think you know which way they are going to vote. MPs are supposed to be responsible to their riding and represent the people of their riding in the House. It's much more difficult for them to do that if their people never share their thoughts and concerns. ourcommons.ca has contact information for all current members of Parliament. Using that information, you can reach out to not just your own MP, but also the MPs who are currently serving on the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights, which is where the bill is right now. If writing your own communication is too intimidating, which I totally understand, then I would strongly encourage you to use ARPA's Easy Mail option. Just go to easymail.arpacanada.ca and you can choose the topic of Bill C-9 and choose from their pre-written paragraphs what you would like to say. You can also edit and write your own information and encouragement as well. If you input your address, it will be set up to go to your local MP and also to Justice Minister Sean Fraser. The more, the merrier. So encourage your family and friends to write too. Now is the time to share this before the bill makes its way back to the House floor. If you're more of a boots on the ground type of person, ARPA is also organizing a rally to stop Bill C-9 in Ottawa on March 12, 2026. They should have more information on their website soon. While it is important to be an active citizen and do what we can at this juncture to prevent this bill from moving forward, I will also remind you to take heart. Jesus warned his disciples, and so also warned us in John 16. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. David also encourages us in Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? That also reminds me of the song, Whom Shall I Fear? Which states, I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. With a God like that, the Canadian government and the Liberal Party is certainly not worth fearing. I heard a wonderful sermon recently that also shared this encouragement, which I've paraphrased from my notes. Suffering and persecution are signs that God is working. It's a stage on which God's gospel can shine brightly. So don't fear the potential trials that Bill C-9 could bring on our churches. Instead, rejoice and praise God that we are counted worthy to suffer for his name. How beautiful. And certainly outside of my normal knee-jerk reaction to news like this. According to this bill, we do hate. We love the truth. And so we hate the lie. In a world broken by sin and torn apart by man, the only truth found in the Word of God is rejected entirely. Remember, Jesus was without sin, and yet he was condemned. He spoke truth to his followers and anyone willing to listen, and the leaders of Israel had him killed. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, and I would heal them. So continue to share the truth in love, remembering God's promise in Isaiah 55. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. The truth, the gospel, does not come back void. God uses it every time we share, even if the world seems to only hear hatred. That brings us to our regular prayer requests and suggestions. For yourself, pray that God would equip you to take up the sword of His word, to share the truth and fight against the twisted definitions of this world. That when your time comes, you may rejoice and praise God that you are counted worthy to suffer for His name. For this country, pray that the evil workings in the government and the people may be stopped. That truth will return to Parliament, and that God's people will be protected from persecution. Pray that Bill C-9 would be stopped. For Canadian Rubies, we just ask that you continue to pray for strength and faithfulness for us, that we will never back down from the truth, and that we may continue to share with you. I'll close out with this encouragement from Paul in Colossians 3. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him.